course, there are plenty of pretty bad leaders. But then we look at leaders who are effective, but they're not very controversial. So let's look at Paul Kagame, for example. Villain or hero, very different opinions. Ethiopia. Magufuli is very interesting in Tanzania because he's launched an anti-corruption crackdown, which everyone supported at first, and now everyone's fearful of. They say it's scaring away foreign investors. But then some Chinese investors who have lived in Tanzania say, okay, this is the winter now, but the spring is coming because this is an important structural transformation that's cleaning up the system, and that eventually it'll make it better. But then again, if investors leave, then by the time Tanzania reaches its spring, the investors are already no longer there. So you sort of see this question again of structure and versus, it's not really a question, but kind of like a warning light of, how far do we go into the question of sort of it's the leaders bad, therefore that explains it, or do we go back to structure? How do we think of them together?
In general, I would say that regimes in most of Africa are symptoms of the structural conditions. However, I do believe that there is a role of leadership. The role of a leader can be important. And the example I'd give you there would be Mauritius or Botswana, which when both of those countries became independent, were in very, very problematic situations. Mauritius was advised by the British not to actually try and get independence because their economy was entirely based on sugar, and there was a slump at the time. Botswana had the British left Botswana with nothing really, and yet if you look at both those countries, relatively speaking, they have constructed capable states and have constructed, there are critics of them, but a developmental agenda. So there, I think the leadership question was important, that you did have a good leadership which emerged for various reasons in both countries. But I think the wider structural situation of neo-patrimonial rule and poor governance, weak state capacity, these are structural, and they can be made worse or improved depending upon the type of regime that takes power. If you have a comprador regime which is simply happy with continuing the status quo, then the situation is going to get worse. If you have a regime which has a vision, then they might try to challenge some of the structural conditions. Now, how you identify how and why these leaders emerge, I think is very difficult.
But the contradiction is that the world systems theory emphasizes external. So the point is that even the internal, they have this spirit, they have this infrastructure being installed, but the opportunity of global situation that when Soviet Union became a big threat to the United States, the Nixon came to China and China opened the door to China. Okay, that was because of the historical. So the point again is that even regime change become a good regime, become an efficient regime, global capitalism might not be responsive to this type of signal, but to profit. This is again the nature of capitalist system, and the capitalism are responding to opportunities for earn money, for profit. So whether you have clean government or you have democratic government is not the priority for capitalism. That's also the contradiction. Yeah.
I just want to conclude something. The professor just stressed it about the need of the people. For me, I think if we can have a regime that is just giving the power to the people, like in Congo, so far I can think the people never had a chance to have a power. Means recently we go for election, they vote, and then for the people they say the one who has been declared like the winner is not the one who wins. And then everybody go in line with the one who is there now. The West, the China, they say, no, we are for this one. So it means that the power is again being taken into the hand of the people, to the elite. So we keep going back to the same structure all of the time. The elite keeps staying in power because they are helping those the capitalists. So as long as the people do not have the power, it's very difficult. Very difficult. Because we find a good leader, as we say, like Gaddafi, was a good leader. Though the killing was a good leader. Gaddafi was a good leader and then we see what's going on in Libya. Kaunda in Zambia was a good leader. Kagame, you just mentioned him, in terms of genocide, he killed a lot of people, but he's trying to do something for the people. So if the people can take back the power, which I think is very difficult, that maybe we try to help a lot with our problem.
I think Congo is a good example of what happens when the aspirations of the people clash with the requirements of capital. And that goes back to what we saw in the 1960s from Lumumba, what we saw in the last election, where, as you say, the winner of the election didn't end up as the president. And there was some deals behind the scenes, and the Americans and the French and the Belgians got involved. Very problematic.
Any other questions or comments?
Something about the so-called import substitution policy. You mentioned for example, I'm thinking of the case you mentioned, the Zambia. They produce a matrix, but then they have to import from South Africa the plastic wrap. But for me, I think this is just the beginning because of this exported-oriented trade. There's a opening of the so-called import substitution. Yeah. So maybe more and more things will be produced here. I'm thinking of this because I also probably you can point out more examples or cases that for some developing countries, maybe in Latin America or something, that they heed the warning of dependency theory, and then adopted for a more for example, like imported substitution policy, industrialization. Yeah, but it seems that not very successful for this economy, either in Latin America or in some of the African countries like Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So it seems that there is also possible possible limits for taking the warning of dependency theory. Yeah, it's a I don't know. I don't have. I just have this kind of wonder.
Well, I mean, import substitution policies in some African countries obviously didn't work properly, but I think that was largely because of the politics behind the regimes, where corruption started to become involved, and different industries were captured by elites who are linked to the political class. So therefore, inefficiency was built into the system, and it kind of led to a dead end. But certainly, if you look at the history of ISI in terms of what happened in Europe, Britain, for example, it did work. Right?
Where?
In the UK.
UK.
In the 19th century, prevented imports,
Yes.
built up our own, But of course, we were able to do that because we had an empire and we were very ruthless and smashed other countries, like India, China, particularly India. So, but I think the politics behind these policies is where you can identify a lot of the weakness, rather than the policies themselves, because these industries, as I say, become captured by people who have links with the political class and who then
I'm thinking of this, import-oriented industrialization and export-oriented trade. I think it is very complementary to each other in the case of East Asia country, particularly Taiwan. Yeah, we still remember in the 50s, our first industry thrived because of import substitution.
Yes.
Yeah. But right after that, even that process is further opened by the trade-based, exporting-oriented. Yeah. So actually, I don't think a more protective, sense of emphasis on, the import-oriented industrialization is sufficient. Of course, I think for Africa, you have a region integration. Some can we can expect to have the future, but mostly those countries, including the Latin American countries, the domestic market is burdened.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't see much very successful examples that for the dependency field as an alternative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the difference in Asia, of course, was the politics of the Cold War politics and the geopolitics was the decisive factor in many respects, right? Which was absent in Africa. Here you had, of course, you had Japanese capital, which was quite relatively developed. But also you had the Americans guaranteeing the security of countries like Taiwan, Japan, etc.
And
later China, right? And huge amounts of capital flowed into this region for a variety of reasons. One of which, of course, was to try to prevent the region going communist, also because there was a lot of investment opportunities as well. So that the historical process of East Asia is very, very different from what we find in Africa. The nature of capitalism, how capitalism unfolded in East Asia is also somewhat different than what you find in Africa as well. So the conditions are quite distinct, I would say. That's it. Explain why you've had a relative rise in East Asia, but have not had that in Latin America or Africa.
Well, today's time is flexible, but more importantly, we can continue discussion. Don't remind him. Don't remind him. We can continue discussion tomorrow. And in many respects, the presentation today is a good background for his paper. And again, I'd like to remind those who didn't register for the conference that you can register and look at the papers in